I'm going to ask Avinash to start because Avinash, you also have the filmmaker here. You also have Muniappa here. And I think it would, and you work at Biome. So I think it would be good for you to begin. You can go whichever way, but reflecting on the weight of water and reflecting on Shruti's film and sort of contextualizing it in this whole frame and thematic of community resilience, because really community is the face of these two films that we saw.
Thank you, Anshul. Good afternoon, everybody. I think before I say or reflect, I think the larger reflection that one kind of thinks to oneself, especially in the midst of all our younger colleagues here, is a certain sense of embarrassment as a generation that what we are leaving behind, along with all the fascinating discoveries in science and technology and everything else that maybe you all are inheriting, is a very, very difficult and complex problem, right? The problem of climate change, and often while one will share and one will engage in the conversation and share the learnings and the insights that one thinks one has been accruing by doing this work, perhaps it does all of y'all a little better to stop listening to us and engage with these problems far more creatively on your own ground and from your own experience, because we don't seem to have done a very good job of really solving the problems when we've created the problems but not really solved them. So that's a kind of a larger caveat before I want to say anything. But clearly this is a problem perhaps all of y'all in this room have been listening to or been thinking about perhaps since your childhood, because all of y'all are young, and the last 20 years we've seen how as a planet we've been struggling, and that reflects the movie of the Nepalese movie. I think that point came out very clearly, that the idea of justice that is embedded within this problem of climate change, or who creates the problem but who bears the worst consequences of the problem, right? So that's, I think, the stark injustice of that came out very, very, very clearly in the Nepalese movie, but also in a very local level, right? Even in the SAMAYADA HARIVU, we see the complete contrast between kind of even the environmentalism of perhaps easily be graspable by all of us here in this room, because we belong to a certain social and economic class in a place like Bangalore. But how that contrasts with the struggle for livelihoods, especially in the context of India or Bangalore, more locally, where historically we've had caste, we've had very strong social inequalities that kind of underpinned our society, right? And so I think it's very important for all of us to think about this dimension of the problem, about being just, being fair. And when we talk about resilience, when we talk about mitigation, when we talk about adaptation to climate change, how do we integrally, as a part of that problem, think about this problem of being fair, of our society, the inequality in that society, and what that means in our response to it, right? By the very fact that we are all sitting here in a premier college in Bangalore, we are clearly the more privileged, right? And it then becomes our responsibility to think deeply about this dimension of the problem. I would like finally to invite Raghu Muniappa and share his story, but I'll wait and for you to kind of give a cue to me, and that's my opening set of reflections for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to kind of keep this tight and get everybody to at least share, so that we also have the audience and we don't lose them. But I want to continue the conversation, because I think this conversation is important and this voice is also important. So I was going to anyways ask Raghu to share his story, and he's seen the film, but that's not important so much, but it's also, his work and his struggle and where he is now, and how does he see as being, this representative almost like of the voices that we don't hear and we need to hear. So,
So before that, maybe I should introduce Raghu Muniappa a little and talk a little about his work and how his work is part of the solution, in our opinion and in our imagination, for the city, right? So Raghu Muniappa is a well digger. He comes from the Govi community. Raghu Muniappa, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀನಿ. I hope people also let this be bilingual because it's going to be Kannada English. This also kind of our languages and the difference in our languages is also kind of evident literally, right? So ರಘುವಿನಪ್ಪ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನಿಮ್ ಕೆಲ್ಸದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ನಿಮ್ ಕೆಲಸದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡೋದು, ರೇನ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಹಾರ್ವೆಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ನಗರಕ್ಕೆ ನೀರಿನ ಅಂತರ್ಜಲನ ವೃದ್ಧಿ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಫ್ಲಡಿಂಗ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಫ್ಲಡಿಂಗ್ ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಟ್ಟು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ. So Raghu Muniappa is a well digger. He comes traditionally from what is called the Govi community. The Govi community, according to the constitution, is a scheduled caste community. So there are two sub-communities within the Govi communities. They are called the Mannuvaddars and the Kalluvaddars. The Mannuvaddars dig the wells. The Kalluvaddars do the beautiful dry stone masonry. They do the stone work around the wells. So now the well can be reinvented. Bangalore city, by the way, is a city of wells, right? I mean, we historically a lot of our water was the lakes that we saw, like Begur Lake, recharged groundwater, and we picked up a lot of that water through wells, both for domestic use and for irrigation, right? But these have gone dry over time with urbanization and with extensive use of groundwater as Bangalore has grown. But now, when the rains are changing, we know 2022 was, a flood year, but 23 was a drought year, and 24, while it was neither flood or drought, we still have a month of flood and other months of dry. I mean, that's a classic kind of expression of climate change in terms of the rain, right? So, in a context like this, we believe if every one of us digs a well in our house, directs the water that's falling on the terrace of our houses into the well, it helps both the flooding problem and the groundwater problem, right? And Raghu Muniappa is one well digger among the well digger communities who's implementing this solution in Bangalore, right? You call him, he will come to your house, he will be able to dig a well even in the smallest of spaces in a day or two, at most maybe a week, and he will be able to do a good job and go, right? So that's Raghu Muniappa's background. Let's also just understand from him his life and what he's done and how he's built resilience for his own life and livelihood. So Raghu Muniappa, ನೀವು ಏನ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು, 3-4 ನಿಮಿಷದೊಳಗೆ. ನೀವು ಮೊದಲಿಂದ ಹೇಗೆ ಬೆಳೆದ್ರಿ, ನೀವು ಏನೇನ್ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡಿದೀರಾ, ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡೋ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎರಡು ವಿಚಾರ, ಆ ಯುನೈಟೆಡ್ ವೇದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಾಡಿದೀರಾ ಹೇಳ್ತಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ, ನನ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಅದೊಂದು ಅದನ್ನ ಹಂಚ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಬಟ್ ಅದಲ್ಲದೆ ರಿಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಊಬರು, ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಗೆ ನೀವು ಮಾಡಿದೀರಾ, ಯಾಕೆ ಮಾಡಿದೀರಾ, ಅದನ್ನ ನೀವು ಹಂಚ್ಕೊಂತೀರಾ? ನಿಮ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೂ 1-2 ಮಾತು ಹೇಳಿ.
ಸರ್, ನಾನು 10ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗೆ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟೆ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಮ ತಂದೆ ತಾಯಿ ಅವರಲ್ಲೂ ನಮ್ಮ 4 ಜನ, ನಾವು 3 ಜನ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳು, ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಗಂಡು. ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಮನೇಲಿ ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಓದ್ತೀನಿ ಸರ್. ಮುಂಚೆ ಅವರು 8 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಅಕ್ಕ ತಂಗಿಯವರನ್ನ ಕೆಲ್ಸಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ, ನಮ್ಮ ಅಜ್ಜಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲೂ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಿಂಗಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾರನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಪುಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ನಿವಾಸ ಇರ್ತಿರಂತೆ ಸರ್. ಅವರು ಮುಂಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲ
ಅವರು ಬಾವಿ
ತೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಮನೆ ಯಾವ್ದು ಇಲ್ಲ, ರೋಡಲ್ಲಿ ಮಲ್ಗೋಕೊಂಡು ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಅವ್ರ ಕಾಟ ಇರ್ತದೆ, ಸ್ಕೂಲಿ ಹುಡುಗರು ಅದು ಇದೆಲ್ಲ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ
ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ, ನೀವು ತುಂಬಾ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅರ್ಥ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. He comes from a well digger family. His father also dug wells, and his father moved to Bangalore and used to stay near Puttinalli, and began in the city without a house. Used to live on the streets and had difficulties. He studied till 10th. Is the He has two sisters. He's the only one in the household that got education till 10th. Continue.
ಆ ಪುಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ನಿಯರ್ ಬೈ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡೋರು ಸರ್. ಹತ್ರ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೋ ಅಲ್ಲಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಯ ತೆಗೆಯೋದು, ಬಾವಿ ಹೊಡೆಯೋದು, ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದ ಸಣ್ಣ ಪುಟ್ಟ ಮಣ್ಣು ಕೆಲಸ ಏನಿದ್ರು ಅವರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು ಅವರೆಲ್ಲನು. ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 10-15 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅದೇ ಕೆರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಿವಸಿದ್ದು, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲೇ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೇನು ಆ ಕೆರೆ ಹತ್ರ ಬಂದು ಮಲ್ಕೊಂಡವ್ರು, ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋರು ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಎಲ್ಲ. ಈ ತರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು 20-25 ವರ್ಷ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ನನ್ಗೆ 1-2 ಸತಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ನಾವು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಮಲಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಪುಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆರೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು. ಈಗ ಕೆರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ತಾತ ಐತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಕೇಳ್ದೆ, ನಾನು ಕೆರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿ ಈಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾವೆ.
So he is reflecting on his own story of his father and grandfather when they first came, how they used to stay near the lake, the Puttinalli lake, how for around 20 years they dug wells, but how in that 20 years his grandfather tells him that all the lakes have gone dry and the landscape has changed to a lot of real estate development and apartments and layouts. ಬೇಗ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ, ನೀವು ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ, ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅದನ್ನು ಹೇಳಿ.
ಸರಿ ಸರಿ, ನೋಡಿ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಮುಂಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಪಾಯ ತೊಡೋಕ್ ಮುಂಚೆ ಅಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ನೀರ್ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತಂತೆಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಕೆರೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ. ಈಗ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಒಂದು 22ನೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಬಾವಿ ತೊಡಕ್ ಹೋಗಿದ್ವಿ. ಆ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ 22-25 ಅಡಿ ಹೋಗಿತ್ತು, ನೀರ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ. ಮುಂಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾನು 3 ಅಡಿ 4 ಅಡಿ ನೀರ್ ಸಿಗ್ತೈತಂತೆ, ಈಗ 25 ಅಡಿ ಹೋದ್ರೂ ನೀರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಲ್ಲಿ.
So the other point he makes is that his father and grandfather tell him that when they came and started looking for work, in addition to digging wells, they would dig foundations, right? So digging was their primary work. And when they dug foundations, even that are just 2, 3 or 4 feet deep, you would hit water. But now, even when they go to 20, 25 deep, when he digs wells, you are often not hitting water. That's the change he's seen.
ಬೋರ್ವೆಲ್ ಮುಂಚೆ ಯಾವ್ದು ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಇಲ್ಲ ಮನೆಗೂ ಬಾವಿ ಇರ್ತಿತ್ತು.
There was a well in every house, but no bore wells.
ಮುಂಚೆ ರೈತ ಇತ್ತು. ಈಗ ನಾವು ಬಂದಾಗ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿರೋ ಓಲ್ಡ್ ಬಾವಿಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಈಗ ನಾನು ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್. ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಆಗಿಬಿಟ್ರು ಅವರು. ಅವ್ರು ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಸುಮಾರು ಈಗ ಒಂದು 30% ಬಾವಿ ಈಗ ನನಗೆ ನೆನಪಿದೆ. ಅವರು ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಬೇಸಿಗೆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ, ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್-ಮೇ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಸರ್, ಬಾವಿ ಕ್ಲೀನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ.
So some of the wells his grandfather has dug. He actually remembers 20-30 of those wells, and many of them give him a call, and he goes to clean those wells that his grandfather dug even today, sometimes when he gets calls.
ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಾವು ಓಪನ್ ವೆಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ ಸರ್. ಈಗ ವಾಟರ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಸರ್. ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ 50% ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ 50% ಕೆರೆಗಳು ಮುಚ್ಚಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಸರ್. ತುಂಬಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಮುಚ್ಚಿಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೀರ. ವಾಟರ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಬಾವಿ ಡಿಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ತಾತ ಇರೋ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮೇಲೆ ಇತ್ತದು, ಒಂದು 20 ವರ್ಷ ಹಿಂದ್ಗಡೆ. ಈಗೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಕೆಳಗಡೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾವೆ ಸರ್. ಇನ್ನೊಂದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ರೈನ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಹಾರ್ವೆಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿಸಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಬಾವಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ನೀರು ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಈಗ ಡಿಗ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೂ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಜಾಗ ನೀರು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾವೆ.
So he says that earlier they used to dig a lot of open wells, but there was this long period where digging open wells didn't yield water. So that work reduced. But of late, given some rainwater harvesting work is happening, especially in areas where a lot of that work is happening, he begins to see that water seems to be coming back up in some of those areas, and where lakes have been revived. He sees a strong connection between the dying out of lakes and the dropping of the water table. ಈಗ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ, ನಮ್ಗೆ ಸಮಯ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಒಂದೆರಡು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಉತ್ತರ ಹೇಳಿ. ನೀವು ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡೋದು ಯಾವಾಗ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿ? ನಿಮ್ ವಯಸ್ಸು ಎಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ?
2015ಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಕೂಲ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟೆ ಸರ್.
So he left schooling in 2015 and he's been digging wells since then. ಸುಮಾರು ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಾವಿ ತೋಡಿರ್ಬೋದು?
ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು ನೀರಿನ ಬಾವಿನ ಮಾತ್ರ ಒಂದು ಸುಮಾರು ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ 1200 ಒಳಗಡೆ ತೋಡಿದೀವಿ ಸರ್.
So he says he estimates 1000 to 1200 wells he himself has dug in this period of time.
ರೈನ್ ವಾಟರ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಸುಮಾರು ಒಂದು 8000 ಮೇಲೆನೆ.
Okay. So he's making a distinction. The 1200 wells are wells which yielded water, and those are wells that So he says he calls them nearby, the wells that yielded water and was dug with the purpose of withdrawing water. But the rainwater harvesting wells to recharge water, he says he's dug around 8,000 of them in these. Okay? So effectively, he's contributed around close to 10,000 wells for Bangalore to cope with climate change. ಇವಾಗ ಇನ್ನೇನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ? ಅದೊಂದು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್, ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಲ್ಸೋಣ.
ಸರ್ ನನ್ನ ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಜಾಬ್ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ವರ್ಕ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಓನ್ ಆಗಿ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿ ಒಂದು ತಗೊಂಡೆ ಸರ್, ಕ್ಯಾಬ್ ಓಡಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂತ. ನಾನು ಡೇ ಹೊತ್ತು ನಾನು ಈ ಬಾವಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮತ್ತೆ ರೈನ್ ವಾಟರ್ದು ಯಾವ್ದು ಮಣ್ಣು ಕೆಲಸ ಇದ್ರೆ ಡೇ ಹೊತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಜನ 14 ಜನ ಮುಂದೆ ನಾನು ಹಂಚ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ನಾನು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ನೈಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಕ್ಯಾಬ್ ಓಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ ಸರ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ಕ್ಯಾಬ್ ಓಡಿಸೋ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ ಯುನೈಟೆಡ್ ವೇ ಅವರು ದಿವಸ ಪರಿಚಯ ಆದ್ರು. ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ದೆ, ಬಾಯ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕೇಳಿದೆ, ಈ ತರ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋಕೆ ನಾನು ನಂಬ್ಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದು 14-15 ಜನ ಹುಡುಗರಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಾನೇನೋ ಈ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿ ಓಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಂದು ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಅವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂಚೂರು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್. ಕೆಲಸ ಒಂದ್ ವಾರ ಇದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ವಾರ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇರಲ್ಲ, ಅವ್ರ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕಮಿಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಅವರು ಸುಮಾರು ಜನ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು, 1,000 ಜನ ಮಾತ್ರ ಕೇಳಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್ ಕ್ಯಾಬಲ್ಲಿ. ಪುಣ್ಯಾತ್ಮ ಒಬ್ರು ಒಂದ್ ದಿವಸ ನನ್ನ ನಂಬರ್ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರು. ಅವರು ಅವ್ರ ಆಫೀಸಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ರು ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ನನಗೆ. ನಾನು ನೈಟೆಲ್ಲ ಓಡಿಸಿ ಫುಲ್ಲು ಸುಸ್ತಾಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೆ, ನಿದ್ದೆ ಕಣ್ಣಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೆ ನಾನು. ಸರಿ ಆಯ್ತು, ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ವರ್ಕ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ರು ಅವರು. ನಾನು ಹಂಗೆ ರಿಟರ್ನ್ ಹೋದೆ. ವೈಟ್ ಶರ್ಟ್ ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, ತುಂಬ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಂದು 3-4 ದಿವಸ ಕ್ಯಾಬಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೆ. ಸ್ಮೆಲ್ ಹೊಡಿತಾ ಇತ್ತು, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಶರ್ಟ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದೆ ಸರ್. ಶರ್ಟ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದೆ. ಆಫೀಸಿಗೆ ಕರೆದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಏನೇನು ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ ನೀವು ಅಂದರು. ಬಾವಿ ಹೊಡೆಯೋದು, ರೈನ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಈ ಥರದ ಮಣ್ಣು ಕೆಲಸ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದೆ ಸರ್. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಜಿ ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂದರು. ಜಿ ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ.
ಏನಿದೆ?
ಜಿ ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಸರ್. ಜಿ ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಇದೆ ಸರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಫೈಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂದ್ರು. ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಯಾವುದೋ ಆ ಥರದ್ದೇನು ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ದೆ ನಾನು. ಸರ್ ಆಯ್ತು, ಒಂದು ಪಿಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಏನು ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಏನು ಇದ್ರ ವರ್ಕದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು.
ನಾವು ಬೇರೆಯವರು ಮಾತಾಡೋದು, ಸೊ ಬೇಜಾರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಬಾರ್ದು. ನಾನು ಕ್ವಿಕ್ ಆಗಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಆ ಕಥೆ ತುಂಬಾ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಟು ಡೈವರ್ಸಿಫೈ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಹಿಸ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ರಿಡ್ಯೂಸ್, he's done 2-3 things. Some of it he shared in private conversations I'll share. One thing is he's an Uber driver, Ola and Uber driver, right? And what he's telling the story of is that formally, if you've heard the United Way, Bangalore NGO, they have been working with Bangalore Climate Action Cell to implement recharge wells in parks and in other colonies. And one of the staff of United Way was a client for him in an Ola or Uber, right? And through a conversation there, he's been able to now become a vendor to them. And what he says in private conversations to me is that whatever it is, he prioritizes the well digging work. And only then he does the other things. He also runs a truck. A truck ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ, ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ ಅದು truck ಬಗ್ಗೆ. Then he also, when you dig a well, you need to insert rings. So he's made a small place where he makes those rings. So with the rings and the well digging, so you see this is resilience for him from his perspective, right? Diversifying. And also entrepreneurship, right? Finding ways of doing new things. So Muniappa ಬೇರೆಯವರಿಗೂ ಮಾತಾಡಕ್ ಬಿಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಸೊ ನಾನು ಇವಾಗ ಆನ್ಸಲ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ವಾಪಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ ಮೈಕ್.
ಸರಿ ಸರ್.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to now request Shruti. I don't think this is working. Okay, you can probably hear me, right? No, it's not working. Yeah, you can hear me now. Shruti, I thought if you could, you also saw both the films. I mean, your film, of course, made it. But I thought if you kind of reflected a little bit, connecting the dots between the weight of water, because your film is also water, and also a little bit of what Raghu has said in giving that perspective on, this whole concept of community resilience, but also ecology. And I want to sort of just give you a heads up on that. So, from this ecological angle, and especially because you work with students and we want them to see these interconnections from the morning to this whole core of resilience. So, go ahead.
It was really lovely watching both the films. I think specifically in contrast, because I think the first film gave like a macro perspective of what's happening in a space, particularly in Nepal. And if you see the film that we've made, it's essentially a little more micro. We're talking about very small things, but how it can make a change in the larger picture per se. What I find interesting, and which is something I try to talk about even at a larger space, is I think while it's great that we're talking about the weight of water, about community resilience, I think we're at a time and space where we have to look at things from an intersectional lens. I think it goes beyond just water, just ecology, just gender, and just all of those things. I think we're at a time where we need to look at look at it from all different perspectives as much as possible. I think the story that he's talking about is a great reflection of that in many ways, right? I know of the work that Biome does in the Bhavi project as well and the community. So I think the idea of bringing in community and livelihoods, which is also what our film is about, is also essentially important, and connecting the dots in that sense, in the sense of bringing together the small steps that everyone can do at whatever level we're in. And of course, we all come from a privileged background, which is why we're here. But what does it mean for people from a different perspective? And I think that's what the film also tries to do, which is try and not pitch, but bring two different kinds of people and have them have a conversation, even if it's just through the medium of this film, right? We're trying to have them have a conversation, which is why I leave you with the question of, let's say if at all the Bonda shop was something that Akka opened, do we know or do we think that someone like a Prasad would go and visit something like that? An update on the lake. The lake has developed since 2024. Not much work happened in the first half. Second half, a lot of work has happened. A lot of beautification, like many lakes that we see in the city. So there's now a pathway for people to walk in. I'm hearing there's going to be, like boating, and there's going to be the normal stuff that's going to be happening, which again brings me to the question of who is this development for? Who are the people who benefit from this development? While it's important that community movements like what Prasad did matters and is important, because otherwise the lake would not exist. It's a movement from about 10 years ago. So I think it's the small things that kind of add up to resulting in what things like the lake exist even today. I would like to leave it at that.
Gayatri, I was just thinking also that, if you could also connect the dots from the morning, because I think because you've been there from the morning. So, coming together and perhaps have the last words before the last words.
Actually, instead of sort of responding as a response to that in terms of a mapping, I like to kind of playfully imagine a invitation, really, both with us. The mapping that we had from mental health to looking at really a global issue around politics and resources and the impact, because obviously we're also sitting in that Palestine moment now, and it was so moving to see that film earlier. You were saying that, okay, we've really messed it up here, and you have your energy. And I think both from the older lady and I think the film in the Nepal film, she's Wait with Water, it's this older lady kind of walking at the end. So intergenerationally, the fight's not gone, And I think this matrix of also the students here, of all of us in a sense, with stakeholders here, this sort of matrix of meeting, you brought up that word privilege, but to think of that often as a resource, just as much as Sir's knowledge of well-digging is a resource. So less to think of them conflictually, but more, which is what you're doing, which is what's happening right now, but to have more space for those kinds of matrixal dialogues. And I think how to take. I was flooded from the morning, and I'm sure our students and others are too. So I'm kind of curious about where that will overflow to, and how we can get back to each other about that. So that's where I'm going to hold it for now.
Okay, so I'm going to just give it. I don't want to not give it out to the house, and sort of just, if there's anybody here, I know it is time to go home, etc. But if there are any of you who would like to comment on Shruti's film, you are in Bangalore, you perhaps live in and around, or at least cross the lakes, and to build those connections. Any thoughts, any feelings that you want to say? It could be one word, two words, three words, whatever.
Yeah, my name is Aarti and I belong to a lake restoration trust, PNLIT, uh, which is looking after this lake in JP Nagar, Puttanhalli Lake. Uh, Shruti's film is very thought provoking because we do have about 100 hutments abutting our lake, and it's in court and things, and it makes you think about, you know, is it right to displace the people who've been there for so many years, though it is not their land? But yeah, it's put some things in my head. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that.
Thank you so much.
Hi. So my comment or something that stood out for me today was the first film, because I kept thinking whether we should work on climate change or something regarding to patriarchy. So I don't know, but I saw just women working so hard, and yeah, there were women playing as well. Hardly I could see one woman playing, and that just kept triggering me the whole time. Where are the men? Are they not worried about the climate change? I mean, just in that context, not in general, but why are women so connected to the environment and men are not that connected, and particularly in Nepal? So I'm going out with that thought and work on it. And still, I have a question: should we prioritize working on patriarchy right now or the climate change? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to respond to that at the end, but I want to, Avinash, you had something to say. You were kind of, yeah.
No, I actually thought you were closing the panel,
No.
so I had some last
No,
things.
I was not. Yeah, so I am going to start closing the panel, and I think my backdrop is on. Is to kind of just some thoughts on, you know, putting this all together for the students to take away, really, because I think that's what we are also owe it to the generation. Because you started with saying that sorry for what we have brought you to, but I think that they can also say the same thing, and perhaps will, if we see these many empty chairs continuously. And I'm saying that consciously, not putting anything on it. I'm so happy that you are here, but it is really a struggle, and you can see it because these topics and these discussions are not easy to do, and so it is difficult for you also to embrace them. But I think we constantly are trying to make this effort. You are making the effort by being here. You are doing this by making this happen. And we have to somehow find a way to, I'm using a millennial language, to crack it, you know, to kind of reach, make that bridge happen. Hopefully, these conversations will spill over and flood in your classes. And I hope that will happen. But really, what is it that we all should be doing, and how should we enhance these engagements so that these interconnections, these intersectionalities all get actually looked at seriously?
Actually, I would like to respond to the
Please do,
patriarchy,
yeah.
that thing. So to me, you know, I would not look at the patriarchy question as something different from this. Another way of saying what you're saying, for example, is, are we in this problem because there have been too many men making decisions? Should women have made all the decisions? Right? And that's another way of saying what you're saying. And so I do not see that the two battles, as you framed it, to be different battles, and that we need to choose between the two. And I think that's the nature of even the larger, and that's gender is one dimension of it. So when we talk about injustice or inequality or the social side of things, gender is one dimension. And in the Indian context, you also have caste and you have class. And I think for me, these are very closely intertwined with the climate issue and with the solutions that need to emerge, you know, if we have to do it. So that would be my response to your question. And maybe that would also be a way of tying things up as a response to your question, Anshul. So
I think I'd also just like to highlight back that Shruti spoke about intersectionality to kind of see the ecology is a kind of intersectionality also actually. So for us to make space for that, for those connections, and as you said, it is difficult. administratively, logistically, emotionally, and we just have to keep doing it. Yeah, no, I think I completely resonate with that, and I think the point is to keep the conversation going. So if you're going with something that's bothering you, I think it's going to keep eating at you. Just see where that takes you in terms of conversations, in terms of content, whatever you're going to be consuming beyond that. I think the point is that it doesn't stop here. It's what you make out of it from here. So yeah.
Raghu, ನೀವು ಕ್ಲೋಸಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಹೇಳಕ್ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀರಾ? ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಫೋನ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇದನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ. ನೀವೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಯಾವ ತರ ಸರ್ವಿಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರಾ, ನಿಮ್ ಫೋನ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಏನು ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ.
ನಾವು ಬಾವಿ ತೊಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ರೈನ್ ವಾಟರ್ದಿಂದ ಮನೆ ಕೆಲಸದಿಂದ ಏನೇ ಇದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ ಸರ್. ಅದು ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಅಂತಿಲ್ಲ, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ನಮ್ಮ ನಿಯರ್ ಬೈ ಒಂದು 800 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ವರೆಗೆ ಏನೇನಿದೆ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗಂಟ ಬಂದು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ ಸರ್.
So he says he's able to dig wells, do any kind of earthwork, right? Digging wells, fixing pipes to it, digging foundations, digging tanks, any of that he's able to do. Phone number share ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂತೀರಾ?
ನಮ್ಮ ಫೋನ್ ನಂಬರ್ ನೋಡಿ
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಿ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
90-801-58524.
Okay, thank you so much. So I actually would have continued to respond on a question also on patriarchy, but I have to hold myself because I want to not lose everybody now. But I do think it's connecting back to what we were saying in the previous session, that it really is coming down to us looking at social change and really having those conversations on social change, engendered, intersectional, bringing in caste, class, religion, region, ecology, all those lenses that we have to, wear to even create this discourse and action around this subject called climate change. And I think climate charche that way is what we are trying to kind of make use of to happen, using film, sometimes using art, performances, etc. So I think let's keep those conversations going. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us.
Anshul, I just want to share a URL with everybody. There's something called www.urbanwaters.in, URBANWATERS.in. You go there, you go to the city of Bangalore. What you will find is a lot of case studies and stories of Bangaloreans having done, having managed water differently, responsibly, ecologically sensitively, socially sensitively in the city to learn from. There are a lot of how-tos and guides about how you can do water harvesting, recharge, wastewater reuse, use the right kind of soap, use the right kind of tap, so on and so forth. Something very actionable. And then finally, there is a kind of a yellow pages section where you will get a whole bunch of well diggers, hydrogeologists, plumbers, masons, water testing laboratories, contacts of all of this, right? So it's one place where you can learn from others, get stuff on how to do yourself, and then get the right kind of help to actually implement your ideas. Please do go use it and go dig a well in your house and call Raghu Muniappa.
Thank you so much.